So CauseLabs is a tech agency using technology to create positive impact in the world and to grow that impact and scale it. And so we're not focused solely on food insecurity. However, when we train our team in human-centered design, we always start with a problem statement. And the one we started with in 2020, Nicole, was how might we provide healthier food options for people in need? For those of you that have taken the IDEO.org and Acumen Academy Human-Centered Design course, this is one of sort of the 3 problem statements that you're presented with that you can choose from. And so I'm not going to go through a whole 12-week course of human-centered design and design thinking for you, but I will give you kind of like a 3-minute recap of some of our experiences and things that we went through and how we start as a tech agency before we even start building any of the apps that we've been presented with today. Like, there is a starting point of identifying, like, why do we need to build something? Who are we serving, and what is it that we need to build to solve that problem? And in this particular problem statement, you know, there are a lot of assumptions behind this. So we start there. We start with our assumptions and we say, okay, let's break this down. We had 6 people on the team when we were going through the course this last time, and we said, okay, what do they mean by healthier foods, and what do they mean by people in need? And so we all have different life experiences. We're bringing different things to the table, and so we all had different assumptions and we all had different knowledge. But we take this and we go into the inspiration phase, Nicole. And so in the inspiration phase, there are a few different types of methods and exercises that we can actually go through. One of them is actually learning from the people. And so we did a series of surveys and interviews and just reached out to everybody that we can think of, and particularly trying to identify, like, who are the people that we're going to serve with this application that we're potentially going to build? Like, what problem are we really solving? And so some of us asked questions about, what do you think healthy food is? And then some of us asked questions about, you know, what does it mean by people in need? And so we broadened our interviews to include people with disabilities, people who are blind, people who are undergoing cancer treatments, people with allergies, people who, you know, don't have any control over the food that they receive. For example, elementary school children or seniors who are receiving Meals on Wheels or something like that. And so we just did a wide sort of survey of users to identify, like, what don't we know about this problem statement? The other thing that we do is we actually reach out to the experts. We went to local food banks and did interviews. We observed, we spoke to co-founders of the local community farms and food deserts locally here in North Texas. And we spoke to leading dietitians, and we tried to understand, like, what is it that we don't know about healthy food? When we're asking a question about healthy food, are people just assuming that we're talking about fresh produce and we're talking about salads all the time? Are we talking about, you know, 3 meals a day? Are we talking about a balanced diet? What is it that we really need to understand about health? And then we immersed ourselves in the situation, and we actually went and volunteered and experienced what it was like to work at one of the community farms, and, you know, watch people that are in these food deserts, watch elementary school students during meals, and just threw ourselves into a situation where we could just observe what was going on. And so we had a lot of different sort of scenarios that we threw ourselves into. The next one. Oh, it's showing those pictures individually. So from each of these experiences that we had and all of the research that we did, all of our various team members pulled out what Human-Centered Design course calls gems, what we call insights. But then we take all of those insights, we categorize them all, and we identify, are there things that are related throughout these? You know, are there things that can be categorized together? And then we pull out the things that we're really interested in solving a problem around. And in that, we come up with our emergent themes. So we haven't even thought of a concept yet. We haven't even put pixels or pen to paper or any pixels on a screen. We haven't developed a single line of code. We're just trying to identify, like, what's the problem? And, you know, especially this year, we've seen a lot of changes, and there are some assumptions that I can make. For example, here in North Texas, Keller ISD just made all of their meals at schools free. So that's breakfast and lunch meals free for all students. And my assumption in that, being sort of in this mentality of approaching things from a human-centered perspective, is that free and reduced meal applications are based on income from a previous year. You can't base income this year from 2019. Things look very different now, and there are people that are experiencing food insecurity that, you know, their last year's income may not reflect that. And so my assumption is that they didn't know how to tackle that problem, and so they have just made it accessible for all students, because their problem statement is, how do we make sure that these students have meals and they're not suffering from food insecurity? And so there are a lot of things that all of our organizations are sort of tackling, and our community members are tackling, and trying to understand that, like, the information, the paperwork that we have to fill out to qualify for some of these benefits, you know, are based on data that is false if you're looking at the reality of your day-to-day life in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of the crisis that we're dealing with this year. And so understanding the real problem that we're solving and creating a tool specific to that is really important. So you'll see that we had 3 emergent themes when we went through this course in March, and it's because we had such a broad range of users that we were actually learning from. And we're not an organization that tackles hunger specifically, or tackles, you know, food insecurity or homelessness or people with disabilities. I mean, our user base is so broad. And so without knowing a specific user that we're targeting, we could build anything. And when you can build anything, you know, you end up with 10 different apps, 100 different apps. And so to sort of tackle one, we needed to know, okay, what were the emergent themes that came out of this? And each of those has its own problem statement. And so it has its own, you know, how might we support this or that? It's a different user, it's a different audience, and it's a different solution that we're actually tackling. And so we did go down the path of choosing one of these emergent themes and sort of designing around that different concepts and doing that brainstorming. But we do have a partner that we partnered with starting in 2017 called Fresh Food Connect, and they had 2 different user stories. One was, how do we sort of prevent food waste from, you know, the urban growers? There's a lot of produce that they produce that, you know, can't necessarily be eaten by their family. What do they do with that produce? And how can we serve those that are in food deserts that don't necessarily have access to healthy foods? And so putting those 2 things together, they actually came up with a solution called Fresh Food Connect. So you can find out more about Fresh Food Connect at freshfoodconnect.org. I didn't want to demo the app because we haven't worked on it in the last year, and it's probably undergone a lot of changes, and I didn't want to demo an older tool or an older version of it that I have. But they have definitely seen an increase in food insecurity. They started out in the Denver, greater Denver area, and actually have grown to scale their program nationally. So you'll see that in the last stat there, that operators have grown 75% nationally. But when they launched the app, which was in the summer of 2017, they actually saw an increase in gardener participation as well. And just in this year, so their 2020 impacts, they're projected to reduce, or redistribute, I should say, 20,000 pounds of produce to those for hunger relief organizations. But that's reducing the impact on the landfills and that food waste that we were talking about earlier, and some of the other organizations here shared. This is a very different app from the other apps shared today, and that's the importance of design thinking and going through that strategy phase. I mean, you can go 3 months, 6 months without ever writing a line of code, because you need to identify specifically what it is you're going to build to see this kind of success and to see this kind of growth. You know, to have, you know, 1,400 people with increased access to fresh foods, that doesn't happen because you had an idea and just started coding right away and started designing right away. It takes that time and effort to really understand your users, understand your needs, and understand, you know, how to tackle all of the different user stories and use cases that are around that. All right, so defining the problem is sometimes the biggest problem. And so We can absolutely help you with that, but we also have free resources. IDEO.org and Acumen Academy do a free human-centered design course every spring, so that's definitely available to you. Because of COVID-19 and coronavirus and the quarantine, everything has been taken virtually. They recommend in that course that you meet in person with your groups, but we have some digital templates that we've actually put up on our website to host all of these sessions virtually with your team or with a group of individuals, maybe partner organizations. Happy for you to download those or download any of our free resources. We really want people to do some design thinking and really tackle food insecurity and other problems from a human-centered perspective and create the impact that we want to see in the world.